I definitely want to second what Aaron has been saying about showing it matters. It especially matters tonight because this conversation that we're all about to have matters a lot. In this sort of midway point in the year, it's the perfect time to reassess what's been working, what hasn't been working, and truthfully in that conversation you guys are each other's best resources, right? Because you're the ones that are constantly working with the scholars, you're the ones with the anecdotes and stories and the experiences. So really more than anything, this is going to be, we're here to facilitate a discussion between, amongst all of you guys. But we're definitely happy to be here to facilitate that discussion. So a couple sort of ground rule things, right, just setting the scene. I will try my best not to steal popcorn from in front of you. I'm sort of going gluten-free, so I've got weird snack cravings, right, so I can't promise that, like, I won't just grab, right, so you just bear with me on that end, all right? A couple other things. Hopes for the day, goals for the day. So I don't want to leave you guys in the dark, all right? So we should go through this now, and if there's something else that you feel should be covered in this conversation, just raise your hand and maybe we can figure out if it sort of fits into one of these buckets or not. I know it's really, really small. I didn't actually expect this room to be this big. So what are we doing here today? We're going to be identifying strategies for setting up and managing your class, group, mentoring group, study hall effectively. We'll begin exploring Common Core and identify some related instructional strategies that are practical, right? So we'll talk a little bit about the theory and where this is all coming from, but we want to make sure more than anything that these are tools that you can take into center tomorrow, right? And nothing too just like, oh, all these ideas, right? We want to make sure that it's practical for you. In terms of hopes, it'd be wonderful if as you're talking about maybe your experiences with scholars or your opinion about something, if you can just speak from an I perspective, right? I statements, right? Because we all want to make sure that we're respecting each other's opinions. And so I sort of already touched on this, but you guys should be talking more than us. So if we're the ones that have been up here, gabbing on and on for a while, then you know something's wrong, okay? Are there any other hopes, expectations that you guys have for this conversation today? Oh, there's got to be something else, right?
Well, I guess I would say...
What's your name?
Mike Ukoa. I would just hope that, I've never mentored before, so I'll be starting this semester, so I would just want to get some perspective, I guess, of what it would be like after hearing, I guess, the people's perspective from the last semester. Okay.
And hopefully there'll be plenty of time for sort of that sharing out after we sort of break down some lesson plans towards the end of the session. I'm going to start talking about what does mentoring actually look like. So hopefully we'll get to that. Anything else? Yes.
My name is Derek. I hope that everyone leaves tonight confident and leading a session of scholars.
Okay. Leaves confident, prepared to lead a session with scholars. Yes, and this will be the last one.
My name is Warren. I said that we have a hope that we get just a better understanding of Common Core and just how to implement it, because it's different than what was taught when we all were in school.
Absolutely. Mike's going to tackle that in just a few minutes. So some of the things that we're going to be doing are sort of like explicit, like, oh, do this in your group. Some of them we're kind of modeling, right? And then the second we'll be talking about belonging in community. This is actually an activity that you might consider doing with your scholars if you're just meeting your scholars for the first time, right? Or you feel like it's necessary to reset expectations, right? When we're coming back from winter break, giving them the opportunity to actually say, oh, to have input, right, in the rule and expectation creation process within your own groups can be really, really powerful and gives the scholars a sense of ownership and belonging in your group. So this might be something that you actually want to try with your scholars, right, as you come back. Silently raised hands. How many of you guys have heard of AYD, Advancing Youth Development? Maybe a little less than half. Mike and Aaron. Okay, wonderful. Good to see that you guys have heard of Advancing Youth Development. Advancing Youth Development is really a framework for understanding sort of the needs of all the scholars, right, that we're working with. At the heart of advancing youth development theory is this idea that all behavioral issues, behavioral challenges that you'll see, right, they all come from a place of need, right? So if a scholar is acting out for some reason, it's not just for no reason, right? It's because there's some need that scholar has to have met, right, in order to be a healthy, functioning adult one day, right? So what you'll hear, some of the language that you'll hear, belonging and membership and safety and structure, those are really the two sort of developmental outcomes of advancing youth development that we're going to tackle today. We have plenty of resources on advancing youth development, but we'll really just be sort of grazing the surface of advancing youth development by talking about belonging and membership for the next 10 or 15 minutes, and a little bit more about safety and structure in a second. So let's jump right into belonging and membership. So I think that when we're talking about study hall, mentoring groups, administering a lesson, there's such a rush to like jump into okay, we need to figure out how to individualize supports. We need to make sure that all the academic instruction is targeted to the needs of the scholars. We jump ahead to sort of the nitty gritty, right, of planning, of lesson planning, without actually talking about how important it is just to set the scene, right? I was a center director for 2.5 years in Alexandria. Before that, I was an achievement coach, and so I ran a study hall of 6th graders in Alexandria. I remember a scholar coming into my classroom, just looked completely dejected, was like upset, and this happens with scholars that you work with, right? They come in the center, and you can already tell, right, that it's been a really tough day for them. The scholar comes in, not working on his homework, distracting every single person that he's sitting around. I don't understand what the issue is, right? But after sort of pulling him aside, talking with him, hey, what's the deal? He tells me that his teacher earlier that day had called higher achievement lower achievement in class, right? And like him and like 2 other students who were higher achievement students in his class were like singled out as higher achievement kids, and they felt completely ostracized in that moment, right? And then they had to show up to higher achievement 2 hours later, right? And where Mr. Rich is all chipper, like, hey, how was your day? How's everything going, right? And I don't know what they're dealing with, right? So we can't underestimate how unbelievably important it is just to ensure, right, that scholars, as soon as they walk into your classroom, to your mentoring, to your study hall, right, that they feel like they should be there, right? Like that's where they were supposed to be the whole time, right? We can't underestimate the importance of that. So to get to the heart of that, it would be great if, how should we pair off? This spacing is a little strange. I'll tell you what. Can we divide up into groups of 3? So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Are you participating? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Or maybe you guys can spread out with another group if you like. But the 2 questions that you guys are going to be tackling, and you've got about 2 or 3 minutes to talk it over. What does it look like when a scholar feels a sense of belonging? That could be in study hall, in mentoring, or in classroom, whatever's pertinent to you. And what could you do, or what systems could you build to promote a sense of belonging in study hall? Straight to the point, right? So what does it look like when a scholar feels a sense of belonging, and what could you do, or what systems could you build or develop in whatever setting you're working with the scholars in, to promote a sense of belonging? So take about 2.5, 3 minutes to talk that over with your partner, and then we'll come back together and share it as a group.
So I think when a scholar feels a sense of belonging, they look like they want to be there. They look engaged. They're with the group and not on the outside of the group, and they're like verbally
structuring the room, because it's like starting just with like putting it in a circle, putting your small group space in a circle.
And let's bring it back in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Wonderful. Now I know we have some willing volunteers who are just dying to share out everything that they've talked about, right? So what does it look like when a scholar is engaged, when he feels like he or she belongs to the space that you guys are in with them, right? What does that look like?
As we were talking, we said that...
Right before you say everything, just so that everybody gets to know each other, you can just say your name too.
Oh, I'm Derek. Teach me, Coach. We were saying that when scholars feel that they belong, they have suggestions that make the program better. They have input into ideas and how things could run and should run to help better serve them. And then we said to support that, we can do like a community meeting and just allow the scholars to give their input. How is community meetings running? How is dinner running? How do you like it? What can make it better? And just a chance to share their ideas.
If scholars at the point where they're suggesting how center could be better, it means that on a certain level they're already engaged, right? Like, or that is if their criticisms are, or their suggestions are sound, right? reasonable criticisms of center structure, right? That means they're already engaged on a certain level. Absolutely, scholars that feel a sense of belonging are engaged, right? Engaged to the point that they'll tell you how things could be even better, right? Something else. What does it look like when a scholar feels a sense of belonging? Yes.
I'm Danielle. I think similar to what Derek said, it also involves feeling like you have a role or a purpose for being in a group. So not being afraid to say something that might be wrong, or participating in an elective that maybe you're not so familiar with, but just giving it a try because you feel like you're in a place that's accepting.
And how crucial that snaps. That's crucial because, especially with the adolescent population that we're working with, right? The opinions of their peers mean so much. I mean, the opinions of my peers mean a lot to me, right? Like if someone tells me my beard looks ridiculous, and I'm like, oh my god, right? Like but that's like amplified a million times when we're talking about 11, 12, 13-year-olds, right? So when a scholar feels a sense of belonging, the sense of purpose that they feel from being in that community weighs more, right, than the potential embarrassment that they'll experience from maybe saying something that the rest of the group doesn't agree with, right? That is safety, right? That is a true sense of belonging. Maybe one. Actually, I know we're sort of already behind on time, so let's go to this next column. What could you do? What systems could you build to promote a sense of belonging? And some of these things you guys might already be doing, right? So what systems are already in place that make scholars feel a sense of belonging as soon as they walk into your class, study hall, or mentoring group? Yes?
My name's Mike. I said that just kind of connecting to them on a personal level and just kind of getting them excited about, aside from just schoolwork, but what they're passionate about, and incorporating that into learning, I guess would help the situation a lot more and keep them excited.
And that has implications. Are you a mentor? Or you're a mentor?
Yeah.
Okay. So that has real implications for the lessons that you're creating, right? Like it might not necessarily be enough that the lesson that's on the website or the Higher Achievement website like gets at everything that all of your scholars are interested in. It might require like an hour or two of some heavy research of whatever your scholars are actually interested in, just so that they know that you do care about their interests, right? And you do want them to belong to that group. Yes, Brooke.
My name's Brooke. Learn their names and greet them by name every time you see them.
Names are so important, especially when they're your mentor or when they're your mentees, right? And they're your scholars. So that's a given. Thank you for that. Yes.
My name is Jamie. I'm a mentor. I was going to say, just like the section before, giving them a purpose or a role to fulfill in the group. So in my case, all three of my scholars come from the same school, so they're learning all the same material. So I give the scholars each an opportunity to teach the other scholars what, like, their take on how the homework went, and get them to explain it to the others. That way, in case they have a question, they're not afraid to ask each other. So it kind of builds that communication amongst themselves.
Builds that trust. That's awesome. It's really awesome. So we've another. I didn't say this, Brooke, when you said the learn your scholars' names, right? But like, in addition to learning names, that's connected to just how you're greeting and welcoming the scholars every single time that you see them, right? Like we all have rough days and different things like that, but the scholars need us to be present all the time, right? When they're around, and so it's not just enough to say, "Hey, Anthony, how are you doing today?" Right? But like greeting your scholars warmly every single day goes so far in terms of how engaged and invested they're going to be in the rest of your lesson and the rest of your mentoring group, right? Assigning roles and responsibilities is crucial. Mike just handed out a little worksheet to you. We're gonna. Did you see this? The fostering a sense of belonging and membership. So this is straight out of a literature review, called "Teaching Adolescents to Become Learners." and that essentially looks at what are those academic mindsets and beliefs that actually contribute to increased academic performance of students, right? And so in the study they find that, or in the literature review, they find that children that actually feel a sense of belonging perceive themselves to be more competent, right, and autonomous, have higher levels of intrinsic motivation, stronger sense of identity, invest more themselves in the learning process. When they're excluded, there's lower interest in school, lower achievement. And scholars are more likely to drop out when they don't feel a sense of belonging in that school community. Right? So the ramifications of this are huge. A couple strategies that we haven't talked about yet. Well, actually, we have talked about the greeting scholars warmly, but allowing scholars to create a menu of incentives. This gets back at the roles and responsibilities that you were talking about, right? Maybe, I mean, it could be really, really impactful and powerful for a scholar to, when an achievement coach or a mentor says, hey, I want you to choose for yourself how you want to be recognized, right? That's powerful, and that's something that a scholar will remember, right? So maybe you actually go through an exercise with them where you say, okay, you can be recognized with, maybe 10 minutes of cell phone privilege at the end of mentoring group, or Chipotle. I don't know people like that, but you know what I'm saying. But give them the choice to actually say, this is how I want to be recognized. Set up roles and responsibilities. You already talked about that. Organize a naming ceremony for your study hall or class, and have scholars vote on the name. So I know in DC and somewhere else, I can't remember, another affiliate, some of the study halls were actually named after colleges and universities, and that became like an identity for that entire study hall for the rest of the semester. It was really, really awesome to see. And it was actually really easy to organize other activities around just that theme. Being intentional about carving out fun rituals that scholars truly enjoy, and creating a scholar check-in calendar so that you make sure that you have one-on-one time with all of your scholars. That's more relevant to those that are leading sort of large groups or study halls, right? But making sure that you have that one-on-one face time with the scholars. Now, is there anything else that we wanted to, before we move on to safety and structure, right, and actually managing the study hall space? It's one thing to set up the study hall space. It's another thing to actually to lord over that over that place. Yes.
Question: how do we? I'm curious about the one-on-one time. How do we get to the point? I can't imagine. I have 2 or 3 scholars per time, and it seems to me if I'm not keeping close tabs on all 3 of them every minute, it's hard. How do you get the one? How do we carve out time to have one-on-one time?
Before I respond, does anyone have an example of maybe a system that they've set up for keeping some scholars occupied while you can be more focused on one other scholar? Yes.
My name's Tracy. I was thinking maybe like having an assignment that they can do, or a homework assignment or supplemental work, and then you could kind of pull the other scholar aside and talk, or even a journal entry or something like that that the 2 can work on, and then you talk about it later with them.
You know what you can also do? You can ask your center director, or maybe a center staff person that might be sort of roving around, right? If they can supervise 2 of your scholars while they're working, right? You can sort of pull the scholar aside and have more in-depth conversation. Mike, did you have any other?
I would also add, just thinking about how you're setting up your group in your room to make sure that you can have that one-on-one time. If you're a mentor and you're coming in and you're working with a small group, making sure that you're sitting in a position that you can work with every single scholar. So I actually mentor on Thursday nights in DC, and I make sure that I usually sit next to one scholar and kind of across from 2 of them in like a little desk of 4, and that allows me to kind of set 2 scholars up at all times, but allows me to work one-on-one with a scholar also, no matter who that scholar is. So make sure you're in a position that you can do that as well.
Cornelia?
Another helpful tool that we another mentor kind of mentioned that over at South, and hi, I'm Cornelia, I'm the Center Director for the South Baltimore Achievement Center. Putting an agenda forward and saying, you know what, next week I really like to touch base with all scholars to have some one-on-one time. So like Ms. Tracy said, if some scholars are working on their homework, part of the agenda is allow them to sign in which part of the hour-long session they would actually like to do a one-on-one with you. And that way you can compromise the whole group, keeping some of the scholars active and then taking the other scholar maybe off to the side and asking them a couple of questions or playing a quick game. So kind of like a rotating session.
just because you've greeted the scholars warmly, you've individualized work for them to, according to their interests, and you've learned all their names, right, all these different things. Just because you've set the space up to be welcoming and to encourage that sense of belonging in scholars, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be on their best behavior at all times, right? Like, because scholars are people that have needs, right, that need to be met, and we're around when they need to have some of those needs met. Another one of those needs is safety and structure, right, and consistency in terms of like the disciplinary mechanisms that exist within your classrooms, right? So, or in your mentoring group. So what we're going to do now, there's a document that's going around. It's called Managing the Classroom Space. We're going to quickly review check protocol because I know a lot of you guys are already familiar with that, and then we're going to take a couple minutes to actually break down some scenarios that are very, very common, and then just we'll have sort of those tools for our troubleshooting tool bag. Okay? Does somebody want to read through the beginning part of the check protocol little text box, rule number, or the number 1? Bueller?
Howard.
Thank you.
Mike, Rule 1, clearly state the rule or expectation that the scholar is not meeting.
Absolutely. So if scholar's off task, right? Maybe they're supposed to be working quietly during study hall or silently, and you see them. Excuse me. You remember what the expectation is at this time in study hall, right? Remind the scholar of what the rule is. Maybe you don't even have to say the rule, right? But what's the expectation at this time, right? Maybe ask them a question. That's a way of reminding them that there's an expectation in place that they have ignored in that moment. It's fine. Number 2, you want to do?
Yeah. Warning. Remind the scholar that they are not meeting expectations, and that if the behavior continues, a check will be issued.
So this is after you've reminded the scholar of the rule the first time or asked that question. Right? What is the expectation? You go back and you see the scholar is still off task, still talking when they're not supposed to be talking, right? Then you let them know. I've already warned you and reminded you of the expectation. Next time, unfortunately, is going to be a check, right? Number 3.
Check. Calmly let the scholar know that she has earned a check by not meeting expectations. If issuing the check will interrupt instruction, make a note and follow up with the scholar as soon as it is feasible to do so.
Absolutely. And some behaviors where an immediate check should be issued, right? Fighting, bullying, blatant and targeted disrespect, hate speech. But you guys are the best judges of this, right? Like this is all very like cute and simple. This little check protocol document. This isn't how it actually happens every single day in center, is it? Or is it? Are things as easy for you guys when handling disciplinary situations? Because they weren't for me when I was still at center, right? They're very, very tough. They're situational. And then you start knowing like the different idiosyncrasies of all the scholars that you're working with, and this scholar is really perturbed about this specific thing, but this scholar isn't necessarily, and it becomes hard to be a consistent disciplinarian for the scholar, right? It is. But this is the safety and structure that our scholars actually need, that they crave, right? They need to see that there's a system in place, that there are expectations that are unyielding, right? Things that you expect of them all the time. Right? And that you're willing to support them and help them and work with them to ultimately be meeting these expectations consistently, right? But in this moment, they need to know that they didn't meet that expectation. Let's go a little bit deeper. In those same groups of 3 that you guys talked about belonging and membership, I want you guys to, actually, this row of people, you guys are going to do situation 1 in your study hall, a quiet off-task 8th grader. Oh, that's a typo, sorry guys. In this back row right here, you guys are going to do situation 2. During study hall, a disruptive 5th grader is distracting everyone. In this row over here, you guys are situation 3. One of your scholars has decided to sit at the very back of the class. Take about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes to read through the situation and talk over how you would handle the situation. And we're going to come back together as a community, share out. Go.
Number 3. Well, I think the phone and maybe not allowing the scholar to sit in the back of the classroom. And I think making it clear that if the comments just don't stop, that they'll receive a discipline, you know, and not letting it get to the point where you've got somebody who's flouting the rules all too
And let's bring it back in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Scenario number 1. In your study hall, a quiet, off-task 8th grader puts his head down on his desk. You know that he has low grades and lots of work he needs to complete. How do you motivate the scholar to finish working? Is this, another thing that I didn't add, is this a checkable offense if it's repeated?
Absolutely.
So someone with a solid or with a raise, or someone from this group? Anyone?
I think it is.
If it's a repeated thing, it's a checkable offense.
Wouldn't it be a checkable offense?
Does everyone agree with that?
Yeah.
Cornelia, why don't you agree with that?
Because we ran into a situation like that before. A scholar continues to put their head on the desk, and it's because they suffer from a disorder. Nonetheless, you can also have a conversation with that scholar about maybe the productivity or reiterating what the expectations are, but you may want to have a side conversation with them about why they continue to put their head on the desk. And if it's more of a defiant behavior, then make it checkable. But if it's not, and they're simply tired, then that's something else that you need to address.
What Cornelia is getting at is really at the heart of the matter, right? If this is a repeated thing, then you have to figure out, is this a medical condition that needs to be, using your best judgment, right? Is this a medical condition that actually needs to be, I need to follow up with this scholar and talk with this scholar's family potentially, right? If he's getting enough sleep, or these different things. Or is the scholar just disengaged, not wanting to do work at that time? Mike?
That's why I'm gonna cold call people. Mr. Derek, why is the scholar's head on their desk? Give me a reason why.
Narcolepsy.
Okay. Mr. Ryan, why is the scholar's head on the desk? Oh, you just put popcorn.
It was a long day.
A long day. Why is the scholar's head on the desk?
Because they're not interested in what they're supposed to be doing.
Okay, good. So these are all sorts of possibilities. Maybe the work is hard. Maybe someone said something to them at school, right? These are all different possibilities that have all different solutions. And so it's important that, Rich talked about advancing youth development approach before. It's important. The first thing is rule warning check is important. We want to make sure we're having a conversation. I think Cornelia says rule warning conversation check, right? Rule conversation, right? And that's important because it helps us how we want to proceed. We've been talking about belonging. Belonging in a classroom isn't just warmth and openness and everyone's friendly. It's also, I feel like academically I belong in this classroom. And if that's a challenge, so we want to address that challenge. We can be as happy as we want, but if someone feels like, I can't understand the math that we're doing, I don't belong, you're not going to, it doesn't matter how warm people are, you're not going to feel like you belong in the classroom. So it's important that you're addressing the behavior that you see and understanding why it's happening and then coming up with a solution to that.
Absolutely. So it's an isolated incident, not a check. If it's repeated, if it's consistent, it's a conversation, and it's a conversation and a needed solution, right? So instead of issuing a check, maybe if it's a consistent thing, you might work out an arrangement with the scholar where every 15, 20 minutes during study hall or during mentoring group, that scholar specifically is allowed to take the hall pass, go and get a drink of water, walk around the hallway, liven themselves up a little bit, and then return, right? So it's not necessarily a checkable offense, but again, it does depend a lot on that conversation. Aaron?
So a question if rule warning check. So a scholar does two things that are against the rules, right? So
Two of the same thing?
Two of the same thing. And then all of a sudden they introduce a third thing that you haven't warned them about. Is it a cumulative?
Is there any way that you could be a little bit more specific without giving up too much?
So a scholar says, shut up, shut up. And then all of a sudden they hit somebody. You know what I mean? But you haven't warned them about it. You haven't restated the rule about hitting.
Or they run out of the room.
If they run out of the room.
Is it? I mean, we see that there's play fighting amongst the scholars. I mean, we tell the scholars the only fighting we see is fighting, right? Period, right? Like play fighting or real fighting. But you can also discern whether or not like some scholars are joshing around and there's no ill sort of will, right, like behind like a little slap thrown or something like that. And when a scholar is trying to hurt another scholar, I think in a situation where a scholar, as you perceive it, right, is definitely trying to hurt another scholar, that's an automatic checkable offense when I was a center director. Mike, do you want to add to that?
I think in that example, those are all individually checkable
I meant to
offenses.
get smaller ones.
So, but
yeah.
look, I think we're getting really bogged down into the details, which is important, but maybe. A check in and of itself is not a consequence.
Right.
And in this, if it ends just with a check, it's wasted opportunity. A check is an opportunity to have a conversation. And so, whether it's 2 instances and then something else, regardless, this is opportunities to have conversations with the scholars. So I think that you can use discretion and say, you know, something's up with this scholar, and have a deeper conversation around that. And you can use your discretion, I think, whether it's a check, if it's you're continuing to show disrespect, and that's what we talked about, then maybe it's a check. If it's something totally different, giving the scholarly benefit of the doubt. It's tough to have a hard and fast thing. I think just remembering that a check in and of itself is not the consequence, that it's an opportunity to have a conversation, which consequences are logical consequences for their for a scholar's actions.
So I just wanted to make 2 points. My name is Mike. On the medical condition, the narcolepsy thing, like these kids all know those buzzwords. And I'm not putting it down, but I had a scholar last year that continued, right?
Yes.
There, she always had narcolepsy. And I called her on that. And, so they know those buzzwords. So we got to be able to, kind of judge and see through those things. But the other point I was going to make is just around the checks, when you were talking about belonging. Like, the scholars want to know boundaries. And it's tough for us to set those boundaries, but that's part of being a mentor. Like, I think we have to set those boundaries so they feel the sense of belonging. They know where they fit.
Absolutely.
So.
That's right. Good. Thank you. We're gonna so spoiler. This is why we are talking about safety and structure following the belonging conversation, because they do go hand in hand, and that these are important for setting up a productive environment in your classroom. And yes, that is absolutely right, that you need to have structure and boundaries.
Unfortunately, in the interest of time, group number 2, we have to skip you guys. If you have thoughts on situation number 3, though, then please speak up. Situation number 3. One of your scholars has decided to sit at the very back of the class. Throughout class, he is playing on his phone, interrupting your instruction. I don't like that I've used he so much throughout all this.
Number 2 is a girl, so.
Oh, okay. Balance. Okay. All right, good. One of your scholars decided to sit at the back of the class. Throughout class, he is playing on his phone, interrupting your instructions with his own comments. When you introduce the next assignment, he starts to boo loudly. How do you proceed? What proactive measures could you have taken to avoid this situation? Yes.
Ed, and the first thing is that you let the person sit in the back of the classroom.
Absolutely.
And so you may wanted them to move forward. The other thing is that they've got a phone, and you've let them play with the phone. You've let them interrupt, and then suddenly they boo, and now you're going to give them a check. And in their mind, it's like, you let me do all these things, and now you're going to give me a check for booing.
Yeah, there's a lot that's sort of in between the lines in this paragraph, right? That whoever the leader of the space is, they've allowed a lot of things to go unchecked, right? And not literally a check, but like just unobserved. So Mr. Ed said first, the scholar is sitting in the back of the classroom. So you have to think about how the spatial arrangement of our classrooms, of our mentoring groups, of our study halls has significant impact on how everything is going to play out from there in, right? And then Mr. Ed, you also said that the scholar did not receive any warnings for playing on his phone, right? Now, obviously, different study halls might have different rules around cell phone use and things like that, but in this specific context, this is something that should have been addressed already. And then the scholar gets to or you introduce the next assignment. This scholar, by the time he boos, he was never engaged in this space. He never felt a sense of belonging. He never understood what structures were acceptable right within that space. Never. As soon as he walked in. right? So the boo is kind of, I mean, it's almost expected, right? Because he doesn't feel a part of anything. Now, is the boo a checkable offense? What's that? Targeted disrespect? What do you think? You don't think it is?
No.
Why? Say why?
I'm sorry, I'm Zabria, I'm an alumni of the program. Booing, I do not think is a checkable offense. Everybody's looking at me.
No,
I just don't think it is. Like, I think if the cell phone thing should have, everything that happened should have been, a conversation should have been held about it. And then if it continued, then the check would have been in place because again, the rules are state the rule, give the warning, then give the check. Nobody stated the rule, nobody gave the warning, so a check shouldn't be in place, in my opinion.
Mike, do you have any insights here?
I would say that, again, thinking from a youth development approach, is it appropriate to boo?
No.
Probably not, right? If you don't, people may not be enjoying this training, but no one's booing. We appreciate it, right? Because,
thank you.
Why? If you're not enjoying the training, what would be a more appropriate way to give feedback?
On the evaluation that you must fill out before you leave.
Right, so if you are unhappy with the training, that is a valid feeling, right? That's good, that is helpful feedback for me. What is inappropriate is the manner in which you're telling me. If you start booing at me, that is an inappropriate way to tell me. The appropriate way is maybe to grab me during the break that we're about to have, maybe to write it on the feedback form, right? So this is, again, it's an opportunity to develop the scholar to say, what you're feeling is appropriate. The manner in which you're expressing it is inappropriate, right? And as we talk about developing youth, you want to give them pathways to understand what they're feeling is fine, what maybe the manner that they're expressing it is something that they can tweak.
Being comfortable with that vulnerability, though, in that moment is really crucial, right? Because as disciplinarian, as the leader of the classroom, right, there's a sort of an aspect of pride there. And as soon as the scholar is like, "Boo! Like, we don't care," it's like, you're attacking me, right? It's like that's what a lot of people feel on a personal level, right? Oh, you're booing, right? It becomes a personal thing. But really, this is what it's about. It's a teachable moment, right? If you don't agree with something, right, then what are the constructive, respectful ways that you can actually voice those disagreements or voice those concerns with the entire group?
And what I would add is this is an opportunity where you as the leader, the mentor, the teacher in the space need to use your judgment. One of the things, booing makes this an unsafe space, right? If someone says something you don't agree with, you're creating an unsafe space by booing. And so this might be a time that you need to shut it down right then and there. But I would encourage you to address it with the scholar to say, I gave you this check for booing because that was an inappropriate way to express what you were feeling. What you're feeling is valid. And you may not have that time in the moment. It might be something you follow up with a snack or after center or another time. Not all of these things have to happen in the moment. When you have a room of 15 scholars or 20 scholars or a group of 3 scholars, it's hard to have all these little individual conversations that are important to develop youth, but it's about creating a time to have that individual conversation when you need to. Do an overview of Common Core, a very brief overview of Common Core, just so that people are familiar with the macro level concepts and sort of the shifts and expectations. And then we're going to get into the kind of so what does all this mean and how can we begin implementing these resources. So some quick background. A big shift of Common Core is very politicized in the news right now. And there's 2 major elements of Common Core. There's the what, which we're going to go over, which are anchor standards. And that's important. But honestly, the biggest, most important piece of Common Core is the how. It's the how are we teaching and learning, how are we teaching and learning from our students and vice versa. How are our students teaching and learning thus. And that's what we're going to cover in the second half of this. So just quickly, some quick background on Common Core. Before we do that, who has heard of Common Core? Who's familiar with Common Core? Okay. What do you know about Common Core? And say your name, please.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jim.
Jim.
I know that Common Core is a set of standards that ask students, essentially it's to get students to think deeper rather than wider. Rather than memorizing a bunch of rote facts, it's about critical thinking skills and being able to present intelligent thoughts based on research.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, Jim, I'm going to sit down and let you do it. Who else? What else people know about Common Core?
It's an attempt to, in one sense, make sure that the students in Wyoming leave with the same basic skills as the students in Florida, as in Alaska.
Right. Because what's the situation now?
There are 50 different standards that students have, plus the District of Columbia.
Right. Great. What else, Ms. Aisha?
Before developing the Common Core, pretty much a group of individuals sat down with corporate America, and they figured out, based upon the discussion, that a lot of the students did not have the proper skills to actually work in corporate America. They didn't have the analytical reasoning skills. Some of the kids were having difficulties pretty much actually getting into college, and they were showing difficulties with basic reading and writing skills.
Excellent. Thank you. One more. What else do we know? It's a really excellent background.
They're aligned.
Name, please.
My name is LaCrystal, and they are aligned to the upcoming park assessments.
Yes. The park assessment is aligned to the Common Core skills. Yes. Good. Thank you. What? Sorry, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Okay. Nicole.
One thing that has been brought to my attention in looking at, my name's Nicole, I'm manager of recruitment at Higher Achievement, and one thing I've noticed in looking through the Common Core standards is that, in working with our scholars, is the lessons are provided to teachers in a way that they have to be taught a specific process. So the way that the lesson was before for teachers had the discretion to decide exactly which strategies they'd like to teach their students to get to that process. The teachers now have to teach a specific process for the lesson.
So,
is that clear? Take an example.
Yeah. Okay. I think that there's a lot of teaching around There's a lot of teaching around thinking, not just around how to get answers. Right?
And if there's like a specific concept, instead of the teacher having the decision to teach it 3 different ways, like how to round using a timeline or addition problems or something, they have to be taught one way that's been set.
It kind of seems like Common Core is a way to get everybody to think the same way, which is really difficult to do, because especially in math, it gives you tell them that this is the method in order to do this, and this is the only way that you should be doing it. And in doing that, it makes you think that everybody needs to. It makes it so that somebody who is from Florida can do the same problem that somebody from Maryland. They do it the same way, so that there's a meeting of the minds in a way.
Okay. We're gonna talk more about some of these things. Okay. What are things that you want to know about Common Core?
Are the IB learning profile things a part of the Common Core?
Sorry, are the what?
IB learner profile.
I don't know.
And that's that way.
Yeah.
It might just be a city college.
Yeah, I think that's separate. The IB is separate.
I assume it would not be.
What else? What are things that we want to know?
No, I know it's like, my name's Mike, and I know it's supposed to be like, I guess, making it more consistent for kids across, I guess, the nation, but does it like cover, I guess, the different facets? Because all kids can't learn at the same speed, and all kids are going to be challenged in different ways for different subjects, so I don't know, like, it seems like it's kind of making it could be too challenging for some kids to keep up with a certain pace of learning, or teaching it a certain type of way. You know what I mean? I don't know. Does it help all kids at the same level?
Okay, we'll get into that. What else do we want to know? Cornelia.
How to provide that type of support, knowing that we're preparing scholars to transition to using Common Core in the study halls, in mentoring groups, in the classroom.
Perfect. Great transition. So, quick background. There's a lot of. Ooh, ew. I hit the end. Now you get to see where we're going. Okay. So, there's a lot of misconceptions around Common Core. We're just going to quickly talk about them. It is driven by the states. It's coordinated, but this is a state. This is coordinated by the Council of Chief State School Officers. It's adopted by most states. I think actually it's 44 out of 50 now. And currently each state has its own set of standards. There's, I think, about 80% that come from Common Core, and then there's some state level expectations, but for the most part there's much more uniformity than there is now. Quickly, you can see this is a little bit outdated. It changes a lot because of the political environment. I think Indiana is out now, and weird things are happening in Pennsylvania. But a lot of times states have been backing out and not calling it Common Core, but keeping the standards. So Virginia, for instance, is the standards of learning in Virginia. If you look at them and look at the Common Core standards, they're very, very, very close. So Common Core is based around anchor standards in each in ELA, English Language Arts, and stands for mathematical practice in math. And Ms. Aisha mentioned this before, that they were developed by talking with business leaders in colleges to say, what do students need when they come to you to be prepared to succeed in college and beyond? And said, okay, well, let's make those the 12th grade standards. And then backwards map from there. Then what do you need to be able to do if you're doing that in 12th grade? What do you need to do in 11th grade and 10th grade, all the way down through kindergarten? So with that, the Common Core standards emerged, and they're anchor standards that run kindergarten through 12th grade. And they're very general, and we'll kind of go through them. So in ELA, the anchor standards that run K through 12, there's additional standards that are grade level specific, but the K through 12 standards focus on key ideas and details, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas, and a focus on a range of reading and level of text complexity. What does that all mean? So what we have here is the actual text of the standards. We're not going to read through all of this. I highlighted in higher achievement green, really important things. So reading what the text says explicitly, be able to make logical inferences from it, cite specific textual evidence. There's a huge emphasis on writing and speaking and using specific evidence to support conclusions. So what does that look like in practice? It's when a student gives an answer, it's show me why are you saying that? Show me where you found that evidence. We mentioned the PARCC test before, and PARCC test stands for Partnership Assessment Readiness in College and Career, I think. And there's two big assessments nationwide for Common Core, and one is the PARCC, and Smarter Balance is the other. And Maryland is a PARCC state, so the Baltimore scholars will be taking the PARCC assessment. In the PARCC assessment, it'll all be done on computers, and actually the test will have scholars drag the text. How did you get this conclusion? Drag the text that allowed you to make this inference. So really showing that support. Determining central ideas, themes of a text, analyzing development, summarizing, supporting details and ideas. And then analyzing the how and why. This is important. Don't just regurgitate what I said to you, but why did the character in this book make that decision? How did this happen? We'll go a little bit deeper into that. Craft and structure. This is also a deeper understanding of how and why authors make decisions, not just what's being said in the text, but why an author may have used this form. So looking at technical, connotative, and figurative meanings of words, why authors use specific word choices. For example, this is a real nerdy example, but who's familiar with Death of a Salesman? What's the main character's name?
Willy Loman.
Willy Loman. Why isn't he Bill?
Why isn't he Bill?
Why is he called Willy and not Bill? Why is that important? What is Bill? What do you think of Bill? What do you think of Money? Money. What is Willie Loman struggling to do?
Earn money.
Earn money, right? That's an example of how one choice in a word helps set the character. We analyze the structures of texts and assess how point of view or purpose shapes the content and style of text. Why did the author decide to write this in the first person? Why is that more powerful? Why is a poem more powerful here? Integration of knowledge and ideas. This is incredibly important. This is one of the biggest shifts with Common Core right here. In Common Core, it's not just about reading, and ELA isn't just about reading text. It's about watching movies, listening to podcasts, connecting speeches with what you're reading, taking different types of media, looking at charts and what that tells you, having literacy across different media platforms, being able to delineate and evaluate an argument, and looking at the validity and reasoning of evidence. So this is important, right? Is being able to delineate what the argument is of a piece. What is the author saying? Which is separate from, do you agree or disagree with what's being said? And being able to understand arguments like that. And analyzing two or more texts to build knowledge and compare the approaches different authors take, because texts have different perspectives. We'll go a little bit deeper into this. The other big piece, Common Core, is around there's an increase in reading of nonfiction texts, reading text across subjects, of having interdisciplinary study. Science doesn't just happen in science class. Science is going to happen in literature and what you're reading. It happens in math and how you're connecting to problems. Having social studies, it happens across text. So there'll be more nonfiction reading and reading across subjects. Any questions there? And we're gonna go a little bit more deeply to follow how this looks across grades. Any questions on the anchor standards? Okay, I'm gonna go quicker because it's gonna be quick. So we're gonna do this. We're gonna follow a standard. I said that the anchor standards are K through 12. So does that mean that the expectations for a kindergarten student are the same as a senior high school? No, right, exactly. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna follow one specific standard, the standard of integration of knowledge and ideas, and we're going to see how it morphs from 5th grade through 8th grade, the age of our scholars, okay? Who can read what the expectation is for 5th graders? Go ahead.
Mike, analyze how visual and multimedia elements contribute to the meaning, tone, or beauty of a text. Graphic novel, multimedia presentation of fiction, folktale, myth, or poem. Compare and contrast stories in the same genre, such as mysteries and adventure stories, on their approaches to similar themes and topics.
All right, Mr. Mike, you're going to be our 5th grade expert, okay? All right, who's going to be our 6th grade expert? And Mr. Morrow.
Compare and contrast the experience of reading a story, drama, or poem to listening to or viewing an audio, video, or live version of the text, including contrasting what they see and hear when reading the text and what they perceive when they listen or watch. Compare and contrast texts in different forms or genres, examples stories and poems, historical novels, and fantasy stories, in terms of their approaches to similar themes and topics.
Okay, so we talked in the beginning about Common Core is about narrowing and going deeper. How are we starting to go deeper in 6th grade?
Yeah, including audio, video, and live versions of text.
Mm-hmm. What else? What were we looking
Different
at?
form.
My friend Mike in 5th grade, what were we looking at here? We were comparing and contrasting text in what? Do you remember?
Adventures and stories.
In
The same genre.
in the same genre. Now we're looking at different genres, right? So really being able to compare and contrast across that. Okay, now I need a 7th grade expert. All right. The men are stepping up.
Ryan. Compare and contrast a written story, drama, or poem to its audio, filmed, staged, or multimedia version, analyzing the effects of techniques unique to each medium, For example, lighting, sound, color, or camera focus, and angles in film. And compare and contrast a fictional portrayal of a time, place, or character and a historical account of the same period as a means of understanding how authors of fiction use or alter history.
Okay. What is this going to take to be able to do this? What do you need to understand?
You have to understand history in order, what actually happened.
So exactly, it's not just what I just read in class and spitting back and regurgitating information to you. It's being able to then connect that to a world outside of what just happened in this class. Maybe it's a historical event. Maybe it's something that's happening in my community. Is this something that we can do at Higher Achievement? When and where can we do this? How can these interactions happen?
Mentoring time.
Mentor, how?
Through general conversation.
Okay, expand on that.
If you were having a conversation about, I guess, their homework, you can just give the examples or ask questions like, how does that relate to something that you did, last week, or how does that relate to your home environment?
Right.
Such as things like that.
Good. Zachariah, yes.
For an example, if you're working on math, I know a lot of times in my class we say, how is this going to help us in life? You can give a real life example of how, like counting money, for example, things like that.
Right.
Or when you're just like starting to talk to them, what did you do this weekend? Well, I went to the movies. What movie did you see?
Mm-hmm.
And then if it was a historical drama, you could talk about that. Or if it was a book, you could say, well, or it had been a book. How did it differ? Did you read the book? How did that differ?
Yes. And what I love about this is it's not just Common Core lines, it's a best practice, right? If you can relate something that you're reading to your own life, you're going to be more engaged. Okay, 8th grade expert. Yes.
Crystal. Analyze the extent to which a filmed or live production of a story or drama stays faithful to or departs from the text or script, evaluating the choices made by the director or actors. Analyze how a modern work of fiction draws on themes, patterns of events, or character types from myths, traditional stories, or religious works, such as the Bible, including describing how the material is rendered new.
Okay. What shifts do we see here?
Well, it says like everything is in the plural in the bottom paragraph, so like identifying patterns and types of stories or characters, it requires you to have a really large breadth of knowledge of different themes that you might have explored over the last 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Good.
I think also the concept of a theme.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's distinct from plot.
And you're also getting in the mind of the creator before you kind of relating it to yourself and what was going on with you.
Exactly. So look at where we started. We started here. This absolutely relates to where our 8th graders are going. They're going deeper though, right? So think about that when you're in your mentoring sessions, and Rich is going to talk a lot about Bloom's taxonomy and questioning to go deeper. But think about when you have those scholars who are grasping something quickly, how you push them deeper. I was reading a study about academic achievement, and it talked about volunteer tutors actually, and said the very best tutors, 90% of their interactions with their students is asking questions. So think about that. How are you asking questions? And Rich is going to go through examples of specific types of questions that you can ask to foster this type of deeper thinking. Quickly, I'm going to go through the math practice as well. Talked about one of the things, just to dispel, there's not, with Common Core, it's a lot more about, there's a lot of metacognition, thinking about how you think. It's not prescriptive to say you must do this one thing. It's about, there's a little bit of a misconception because there's a lot of focus on developing numeracy, which is the math equivalent of literacy, and that number sense. And so there's a lot of focus on having deeper knowledge from an earlier age on developing that. And there's not necessarily one Common Core way to get about doing things in math or in ELA. But here are the standards for mathematical practice. These run K through 12. I'm not going to go through them. They're just Really quickly, making sense of problems and persevering in solving them. In green, consider analogous problems. Try cases with simpler forms. These are things that we do all the time, right? We think about, okay, we like to make comparisons. Okay, this is the solution I used here. Let me try it again here. Using objects and pictures to help conceptualize a problem, and simply asking a question, does this make sense? Right? Give a quick example. I can't remember. Is it a negative times a positive number? Is that positive or negative? I don't know. Do an example. Does this make sense? Reason abstractly and quantitatively. Big thing with this is being able to represent what is happening symbolically, not just finding the answer, but understanding the thinking behind it. Construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. I think about geometric proofs. We talked about this in the ELA standards as well, understanding what the structure of an argument is, as separate from what the author is saying and whether you agree or disagree with the argument, but being able to look at assumptions and being able to give examples and counterexamples. Standard 4, being able to model with mathematics. This is using graphs to solve problems. Use appropriate tools strategically. That can vary from pencil and paper and ruler and protractor to a graphing calculator. It's going to vary by the grade. But this sounds silly, but it's important to know how we use the different tools at our disposal. We do this all the time in our jobs. Attend to precision, being very clear about units of measure, understand what we're saying, that velocity is going to be in kilometers per hour or miles per hour. So we're going to have to divide distance over time. Look for and make use of structure, recognizing that 3 plus 7 equals 7 plus 3, that sort of thing. Being able to identify patterns, use that to understand more complex problems. Look for and express regularity and repeated reasoning. Noticing that if, noticing patterns like multiplying by 9s, right? What's 9 times 8? 72, right. What's 9 times 6? We need some math flashcards for this group. Okay, what's a trick for knowing our 9s? Okay, right. Or what?
Well, the 2 digits equal 9.
The 2 digits equal 9. Thank you. I don't really want to see numbers. Okay. So one difference with math, just quickly, is standards by domain. Math is a little bit different than ELA. You'll see that there's a lot of standards that run K through 8. Something like counting and cardinality is you're not going to see at the high school level. It's something that's handled in kindergarten, but there's other standards that run throughout. So, for example, geometry, K through 8. What an 8th grader is doing is going to be different than a kindergarten student. So we're going to do the follow the standard again with geometry, seeing how we go deeper throughout the grades. Who's going to be 5th grade? Brooke's going to be 5th grade.
Oh.
Read 5th grade. What's expected?
Oh my God. Graph points on the coordinate plane to solve real-world and mathematical problems. Classify 2-dimensional figures into categories based on their properties.
All right. Thank you. You be my 6th grade.
Solve real-world and mathematical problems involving area, surface area, and volume.
Okay, so we're beginning to introduce area, surface area, volume. Mr. Mike, can you see 7th grade?
Draw, construct, and describe geometrical figures and describe the relationship between them. Solve real-life and mathematical problems involving angle measure, area, surface area, and volume.
Okay, so we're seeing this integration of real-world, real-life problems. And then 8th grade. Mr. Derek, you're up front. Can you read that for me?
Understand congruence and similarity using physical models, differences, or geometry software. Understand and apply the Pythagorean theorem. Solve real-world and mathematical problems involving volume of cylinders, cones, and spheres.
Okay, so we're starting, just to show, we're starting in 5th grade with 2-dimensional figures, and we're working at defining volume in 3 dimensions of cylinders, cones, spheres, right? Seeing that deepening. Okay. Yes.
So as I'm going over these standards, it feels to me like a lot of these things are before I learned them when I was in school. Like I learned the Pythagorean theorem, I think, in high school. Is that pretty common that a lot of these things are kind of being pushed forward in terms of when they should be learning them?
A lot, especially like with math, a lot of that geometric reasoning, right, is being pushed throughout from K through 8. Yeah.
So the question is, so because Common Core hasn't been implemented since they've been in kindergarten,
right,
and now I'm in the 6th grade, I say I'm in the 7th grade. I'm a 7th grader. I know what the standards and anchors are for what I'm supposed to be learning, but if I'm still working on concepts from the 5th grade Common Core, what do you do?
So that's a good piece. So that's actually an excellent segue into what Rich is going to talk about. I'm going to hold on that, and I'm going to take Erin's question.
So, you speaking for all of higher achievement, one of the questions I would have as a mentor sitting here is, I guess, twofold. What impact can we expect to see on students, right? So they're having to do Common Core on the ground level, and it's different. So what's the impact that it's going to have, because the bell rings and they come to us? And then second of all, what is higher achievement going to do to equip us to deal with that impact?
Excellent. So I would say a few things. This is a shift, and a shift, there's a little bit of a shift in the what in the standards that are being taught, because there's a big shift in the how, because it's a lot more questioning, and not just regurgitate the answer to me. And that's a big shift. It's something that a lot of students are used to, just regurgitate and move on. I know that's what I was used to growing up. And it takes time to begin thinking about and tackling these problems on a deeper level. So what you as a mentor and staff members need to do is to feel comfortable and creating an environment in your classroom where scholars feel like they belong and that there's structure to create this, which is no easy task, but that it is you feel comfortable being uncomfortable and grappling with questions, that you are celebrating effort in pushing through these problems, and that you are asking the types of questions. Remember, the best tutors and mentors and staff members, 90% of their interactions are asking questions, and that's where Rich is going to come in now and giving different techniques that we can use to ask questions to push scholars deeper, and meeting them at the level that they are to begin pushing them deeper. Well, it's something that, the thing is, this is stuff that we all do every day. Mr. Ron, what's your job? What do you do when you're not changing higher achievement scholar lives? Insurance agent. You're an insurance agent. So, do people come into you and say, like, you don't have like I have X dollars and you need to have 600. What do I need to do? Right? It's not like a 4X plus 6 equals. Like, you don't have that. You have word problems that are much more complex, and there's it's multifaceted, right? You have to draw on knowledge from not just a math book, but lots of different areas, right? And that's what Common Core is facilitating. It feels different, but it's the type of thing that we're doing all the time, and we don't always realize it. And honestly, it's the type of thing that good private schools and suburban schools are expecting their students all the time. It's bringing these level of expectations to everyone.
So we've got about. It's really important to us that you guys actually dive into the mentoring lesson and sort of take a lot of these things that we've been talking about and actually put them into action. So I'm gonna breeze through Bloom's taxonomy, questioning for understanding, and checking for understanding in about 5-6 minutes. And we can do that because luckily all three of those concepts, all three of those teaching strategies, all speak to one another. And this is getting back to what Mike has been saying about this. Common Core signals maybe more than a shift in standards, right? A shift in the way that a lot of this material is actually being presented, right? And the techniques that teachers are going to have to use to present this material. So anticipating that shift, right? Our organization has begun to research and build up our resources on a couple different high leverage teaching strategies. Those are the three that we're going to there are 3 that we're going to talk about today. There are others, right, that you can apply, but we're going to focus on Bloom's taxonomy, questioning for understanding, and briefly on checking for understanding. A lot of this stuff is, you guys are already doing in your mentoring groups, in your study halls. Solidly raised hands. Who's heard of Bloom's taxonomy before or seen this pyramid? Wonderful. So, you guys are all teachers in some regard, right? Mentors. As a teacher, presenting a lesson plan, you inevitably have a goal that you'd like to accomplish with your scholars, right? By the very end of that lesson. What Bloom's taxonomy represents is a framework for actually organizing those educational goals. Okay, it's a way for you to think about. Think about this, right? Like, how hard is it to track in a mentoring group, right, with just your 4 scholars, how much each individual scholar has comprehended from the lesson at different points in that lesson, right? So this one scholar might remember what I said at the very beginning of the lesson, but this scholar over here is already ready to write his own book on the thing, right? So Bloom's taxonomy is just a tool for us to think about that, to track scholar comprehension of a lot of the stuff that we're presenting, a lot of the material that you guys are presenting. This is the old version of Bloom's taxonomy that was invented back in 1956 by brother Benjamin Bloom. They've changed. They released a newer version in 2000, which adds this creating instead of evaluation, sort of shifts some things around, just to sort of signal that the 21st century learners are going to have to be able to do more than just evaluate and synthesize. Right? They're going to have to be able to create and to collaborate, and so that shift in Bloom's taxonomy sort of mirrors that shift in the education world.
Before Rich moves on, I want to just, one point I didn't bring up. We're talking a lot about lessons, and it's hard because people have a lot of different roles in the room. Some are working on mentoring lessons, some are working on homework. And these principles apply no matter what we're doing. In any interaction with youth, in any interaction, whether you're teaching a lesson or helping with homework, these types of strategies are applicable, but even if so it's easiest, I think, to see when you're teaching a lesson and kind of insert these types of questions and this type of thinking. The same principles are going to apply when you're doing homework and scholars are coming to you with questions, and we'll be able to see the different levels that is being expected of them and where they are. I just wanted to clarify that.
Absolutely. So the bottom of that pyramid, and you guys have all these resources in front of you, so you can see the pyramid. But the bottom level, right, the base level of understanding that we expect from scholars, right, is remembering, just maintaining basic knowledge through learning and memorization, right? So when you're out, when your group, your mentoring group or class is operating at this level of Bloom's, right, you're asking them to draw, to identify, to define, right? And end goal, right, and sort of an ideal situation at this base level of the pyramid is for a scholar to be able to basically spit back a definition that you've already given to them. Then there's understanding. So this is more than just saying exactly what you said. It's beginning to use their own words to actually make sense of the things that you've said to them. So they're beginning to construct meaning and explain for themselves. So you're asking them to paraphrase, to discuss, and maybe a graph or a diagram or a summary would be an end goal at this level of Bloom's taxonomy. Then we move to the applying level, where scholars are beginning to make connections. Maybe they're drawing on sort of prior knowledge in order to answer a question, right? So you're asking them to modify, to solve, and so then we're moving more towards predictive knowledge, right? Like how much can you take from what you already know and from what has been presented to you, and begin to infer and see what's going to come. The analyzing level is the fourth level of Bloom's taxonomy, where you're beginning to break the material down into components. You're looking at relationships. If this is literature, right, you're looking at sort of maybe the things that aren't necessarily stated about the relationships between protagonists and antagonists or something like that, right? So you're dealing with unstated assumptions. Trigger words, compare, differentiate, investigate. And so that comparison, the syllogism, right, is going to be maybe an end goal at this level of Bloom's taxonomy. At the evaluation level, we're asking scholars to judge, to criticize, to assess, to come up with their own opinions on how they feel about the thing that's been presented to them. You must be able to think critically. Some trigger words are critique, criticize, judge. I see this a lot, or sometimes with community meeting, where center directors are asking scholars to sort of think a little bit deeper about maybe some issue that's been presented to them. Are there some like really convincing formats for like getting at this level of Bloom's taxonomy that you guys have seen before? Like specific activities that you guys have seen at Center that really get to this level where scholars are actually injecting their own opinions, where they're criticizing something and rendering judgment? Yes.
We did an activity once where students role played, and they served as members of the city council, and we had a topic where there were various viewpoints.
So they didn't have a script?
There was no script. They just knew the various viewpoints. So they had to act out. Like, for example, one student had to play the role of someone advocating gardens in the community, promoting green gardens. And then another scholar had to play the role of a corporate business that did not want green gardens in the community because they wanted to use the property for development. So once they were able to understand the scenario, they were able to act out, they were able to look at the situation for themselves, they were able to put forth a criticism, they were able to judge the situation, so they were able to really act out higher order levels of thinking.
That's a perfect example of this level of Bloom's taxonomy. Another format that I've seen is that take a stand activity. Have you guys ever done anything like that, where you like disagree, agree, neutral, and you like ask scholars to like move around and say how they feel, why they disagree, right? This really is at the heart of a lot of Common Core theory, right? Of using evidence to justify your opinion, right? And this is, you will see this with writing assignments that scholars are using, but using evidence to prove a point. Mike?
Can I ask which mentors are doing homework? How can you use this level of evaluating? How could you do that level in homework help?
Well, if they bring in mathematics homework, so how, like, instead of just providing a division problem and they say, oh, well, I know that, that's this, like the answer, you actually have them prove it to you. So can you demonstrate how you got from point A to point B, or what rule applies to this problem that justifies you going about this course of action? So.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. And then the last level of Bloom's taxonomy is the creation level. So scholars understand the material has been presented to them enough that they can actually build on it themselves, right? So they're forming a coherent and functional whole. Trigger words are obviously create, make your own version of, and maybe they'd have to create a manual for something, or if it's connected to a play, or excuse me, to a piece of literature, maybe they have to take the characters from that piece of literature and write their own one-act play about what happens next, right? Something like that. But ultimately you're building on everything that they've already learned up until that point. So you guys have some really awesome resources in front of you. This is where Bloom's taxonomy really connects with questioning for understanding, because you're questioning for understanding when you're scaffolding the questions that you're asking your scholars in such a way as to pull them into comprehension, right? So that's what these sheets are really designed to help out with, so that there are sort of buzzwords as you guys. And this first one, a lot of just question stems, right? That you can use with your scholars to get them operating on different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So it might mean sitting down at the before as you're preparing your lesson with scholars, and looking at all the questions that are already written into the lesson, and then taking out the Bloom's taxonomy pyramid, looking at the questions that already exist, right, and saying what can be added, how can this lesson be fleshed out in a way that we're actually getting scholars by the end of the lesson creating, evaluating, and judging for themselves, right? So definitely use these resources as you guys begin lesson planning or continue lesson planning. Checking for understanding. I think that this is something that a lot of you guys are doing already in class. Because we don't have too much time left, and it's really important that you guys at least have 10 minutes or so with the lessons. I'm really going to breeze over checking for understanding. But the real question with checking for understanding is, when should you be checking for understanding in a lesson? What's that?
Continually throughout the lesson.
Continually. I thought it was going to be a trick question. I thought I was going to get someone. You should be questioning for understanding all the time. At the very beginning of the lesson, you can check for understanding by drawing on previous knowledge, right, of a scholar. So maybe you've introduced what you're going to be doing that day. You want to assess that they're on your level, even at the very beginning of the lesson. So maybe you ask them to consider a situation similar that they've been in themselves, right? And begin thinking about that as sort of the foundation for the conversation that day, right? Through the lesson, right, as you're actually teaching the material, you have to make sure that you're asking questions consistently of the scholars, right? And then you have to sort of use your best judgment, assessing where scholars are operating on this Bloom's taxonomy pyramid, but figuring out as you're teaching, right, are the scholars actually getting this? And then at the very end of the lesson, using the questions that inevitably check for understanding in order to inform how you need to actually amend your next lesson with scholars, right? So if you get to the very end of a lesson with scholars and 1 out of 4 of your scholars understands everything that you just talked about for an hour after you check for understanding, then you need to know that you know that you might have to revisit that lesson or just hit it a different way with the scholars the next week, right? So you guys should be checking for understanding throughout your lessons, and most of you guys are doing that already. So without further ado, we're actually going to move into the final activity of today's training, where hopefully you guys have brought some lessons. Have you brought lessons? Raise your hand if you brought a lesson.
Staff should have.
Okay, so that's fine. We've got some lessons here. Basically, what we're going to do for the last 10 minutes of this training, we're going to read through a lesson, and then we're gonna keep these 2 questions in mind as we're sort of redesigning it, right? How might you redesign the lesson with Bloom's and questioning for understanding in mind? What questions are missing that are like pivotal points in that Bloom's taxonomy pyramid that you need your scholars to get at? And then what teaching techniques or checking for understanding techniques would you use to keep scholars engaged, right? Are you cold calling scholars? Are you sort of saying something and then waiting for scholars to respond? Or what techniques are you actually using to check understanding? So read through these lessons. It doesn't have to be a million different notes that you guys are making, but in just the next 5 minutes or so, just think about ways that you can take a lot of the techniques that we've learned today, that we've talked about, and actually build and improve on the lesson that's before you.
You may need to, would you mind just sharing?
Yeah. So a lot of you guys aren't actually teaching lessons. Just a little mind. This is all still applicable, right? So this has ramifications for supplemental work creation. This has ramifications for homework help, right? What are some techniques that you can actually use to make sure that a participant over here, I think, talked about something that you could do to make sure that a scholar understands everything on their homework, right? So even if this doesn't necessarily apply to you teaching the lesson, just think about how this can be carried over into whatever your pertinent affiliation with the scholars is. Okay?
And for the homework crews, if you flip towards the back of the lesson, there's worksheets that may look more familiar to what a homework assignment would be. And so it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. That you might see a homework assignment, a worksheet that they might get for homework, but then you can kind of see the lesson that would go along with that. Just as a practice.
As you guys are working on that, I'm walking around and handing out just an exit ticket. And this is us modeling, checking for understanding. But this is something that you guys want to do in your own mentoring groups, just to make sure that scholars got everything, right? Or that they understood everything that was in their homework. And so when you guys fill this out, you can actually just leave it right where you're seated. What's that? Yeah, but once you fill them out, you can just leave them right where you are. Actually, you guys are probably going to do more with these reflections of your own than we will. So it might make sense just for you to take your own exit ticket. But that's not typically how exit tickets work, all right? But just as a reminder of everything that we've talked about today, you guys should take your exit ticket. In about 1 minute, if we could just have maybe 1 or 2 people share out one addition or one amendment that they made to the lesson that takes into consideration some of these teaching strategies that we've talked about today. Cool. Let's bring it back in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. We have 1 or 2 people that just wants to share something that they decided to add. Yes. Remind me. I know your name because I've seen you before, but
Will.
Will. Good to see you again.
One thing we could add at the very end is to have them design their own science experiment.
So can you talk a little bit about what's in front of you? Or what, yeah.
Sure. Oh, does everybody not have the same thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I have a egg observation. It's kitchen sink science. So basically, there runs through the scientific method for how to run a science experiment. Make observations, create the hypothesis, then test the hypothesis with the experiment. So at the end, after they report the results, something you can add to the lesson then is to have them design their own experiment that their classmates or other scholars can follow to see if they actually understood.
And what technique or what we've already talked about today does that incorporate?
That's the creating part.
The creating part of Bloom's taxonomy.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's an awesome example of really great beyond activity, right? A lot of the lessons have that beyond section. Some of those beyond activities are kind of dry, but that's really where you can actually get to that top level of Bloom's taxonomy for some scholars, maybe that finish their work early, or who are consistently just like, I want something different, I want something more, right? So that's a really great example of incorporating Bloom's into the lesson. Anybody else want to share out? Yes, right here. Can you remember your name?
I'm Dan.
Dan.
I had the bridge building activity where there's some concepts of what does a bridge do, what is its purpose, what are the forces at play. There's a part of the activity where it has the kids push their hands together to demonstrate compression, pull their hands apart to demonstrate tension. I just thought maybe you could, by applying, maybe have them think of other examples in their household or in their maybe on the school bus or any type of example they could pull out of their head about where they might see the compression and tension forces other places.
Absolutely, getting them to draw on prior knowledge and just begin to make connections with the material that's being presented. Wonderful. I'm sorry that we didn't get more practice with this and that we didn't have any examples that are more like homework related. But it is really, really good practice, I think, just to sit down to think about a lot of these lessons, a lot of the homework that your scholars are working on, thinking about all that through the lens of Bloom's, through the lens of questioning for understanding, and all those other principles that sit at the heart of Common Core. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to fill out the exit tickets.
Actually, could you raise your hand if you've filled out the exit ticket? All right, hold it nice and high. If your hand is not up, take a minute right now just to reflect. Ms. Brooke, I saw your hand up as filling out the exit ticket, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think it's important to fill out the exit ticket?
I think it's important because then you guys can get a better understanding of how you did today.
I'm not collecting it.
Oh.
Why is it so important?
Because it's a way for me to check my understanding of what I learned today and how I can apply it.
Good. What else? Who else had their hand up? Oh, now everyone's shy. All right, Mr. Warren, why am I asking you to do this?
It's a direct reflection on what analysis you got out of the training session directly to ask yourself maybe what at the end what other questions do I still have is giving me the opportunity to go and find more knowledge of what's going on, and it shows you what you actually did rather than the other person.
Good. Good. Who else has filled it out? Anyone just added to the list that I missed? Mr. Ryan.
For me personally, I like to write things down so I don't forget them later. Since all these new concepts and techniques are fresh in our mind, I'm able to jot some notes and thoughts down so I can look at it, refresh my memory down the road.
Good. So that's right. So there's plenty of research that shows that by writing something down, you're going to remember it better. And while we fill the room with wealth of knowledge, I'm sure, if it stays here, it's wasted. And we want to make sure that you're taking something, one thing, and applying it to your group when you go back. And I want to make sure, that's why I don't want to collect it. I want you to write down one thing that stuck out with you, one thing that you're going to be able to use from tonight, and be able to implement that when we go back to centers next week. And we handed out a lot of resources also. I would just recommend, review them, and then maybe in a month, review them again. Because after you've been using things, the new things are going to jump out to you. I would just make a quick plug with the Bloom's taxonomy. Honestly, when I do it, I keep it next to me. I do mentoring, I keep it next to me. When I was planning communities, I keep it next to me and make sure that I'm asking questions on different levels. Because with the question stems, you don't have to create questions. Just go off the question stem. I want to push Mr. Mike deeper, so I'm going to ask him something from this stem.
Give Mike and Rich a huge round of applause.